Hello friends, the Christmas season is indeed upon us, and so we will hear this greeting very much again and again these days. Merry Christmas to you all. And the tone of this season really is about joy, isn't it? Feelings of joy, a deep sentiment of joy, joy desired, joy shared. It's about joy. And all the great religions of the world, in their feasts throughout a year, there's always one that is especially about joy. The joy of community, of family, joy. For example, among the Jewish people, right at this time, they will say to one another and to others, Happy Hanukkah. And it's a season of light, of ever more light, as they light one candle after another on the menorah. And Happy Hanukkah. But then I'm thinking about my Jewish friends who, at this time when they're sharing that greeting, are also thinking about that beach in Australia and that horrible act of violence by which 15 people were killed and many injured, or about the horrific incident that happened at HSC, Health Science Center here, where there was a simple ceremony of lighting one more candle on the menorah. A Jewish doctor was doing that, and in the gathered people there, suddenly a voice rang out with words of prejudice and hatred and violence towards that Jewish doctor because he was Jewish. And yet my friends who are Jewish say, well, we don't deny that, and it brings us hurt and even fear, but we're resilient. And so we will continue to say Happy Hanukkah to one another. And so this whole mix of wanting joy, desiring joy for ourselves and everyone, wishing to bring joy to one another, and on the other hand, so much that is not joy, that is, the sadness of a Palestinian little child in Bethlehem, and where the signs of tension and violence are all around. Or, the fear brought upon by suddenly losing one's job at this point. Or the fact of having lost a spouse, having either through death or separation and divorce. And all of that, and we can think of the wars around our world, constantly new ones, big or small, springing up. We can think of the economy, rising cost of food, difficulty for young people to get good, long-lasting jobs. We can think of all of that and go, well, saying joy, Merry Christmas, is that just too simplistic, too facile, too simply for one day or a little moment around this time? So, well, it got me also thinking about, the original story of Christmas, of Mary and Joseph, the child Jesus, and of the powerlessness that they also lived, the sense of it not being in control, what comes next, that's that reality. Mary and Joseph were suffering the powerlessness of being like refugees, forced from their home and having to go elsewhere to register, to satisfy a huge imperial power, with the threat of violence against them if they didn't, by the Romans. And where do we go? Where shall we sleep? And Mary is on the verge of giving birth. But they also don't give in to the sense of being incapable, powerless, just paralyzed, frozen. Having heard the words of love from God, of being full of grace, of being just for Joseph, they say yes, and they set out, tenderly taking care of this so vulnerable little life in Mary's womb, and they go, they continue. And then you think of the vulnerability, the powerlessness of Jesus. I mean, this is the eternal God who has created all things, and he's born in humble circumstances, perhaps in poverty, born, what can be more vulnerable than a newborn child? And so the Almighty God, having made himself so vulnerable so that we might know we're not alone, and God's love, God will accompany us at all times, and that we should let ourselves be vulnerable in letting ourselves be loved in the ways that others choose to love us, not in the ways that we expect or demand of them, but just the joy, this person, that person in their way, showing us love. And then us wanting to remain in that joy despite all the rest of the stuff around us, and to share that love, to share that joy of being loved by God, being loved by that little child who will grow and, in an ultimate act of love, die for us on the cross. And the power of that, his death and his resurrection, in all vulnerability, poverty, but we believe that love, we're asked to believe, challenged to believe, choose to believe that love is all powerful. And so then what? Well, we say, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. And we, as I said, allow ourselves to be loved and seek the moments. They may not change everything. They won't. They may not change much. But every little moment, every little encounter, every little effort of justice, every little effort of being there with others, and being and doing for others, and we find our joy in that. Some thoughts. There is in our world great darkness, but there's also great light, the light of Christ, and that light allowed to come into our hearts and our ways of thinking about others and about the vulnerable besides us, then we can say Merry Christmas with all integrity, all hope, and all thanksgiving to God. So, Merry Christmas.